And now I'd like to go ahead and introduce the 116th Governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, and we've got a gift for her. Her husband, First Gentleman Michael Haley, served our country recently in Afghanistan. He's in the United States Army. So, Governor, we've got a jewelry box with the seal of the U.S. Army on behalf of Palmetto Conservative Alliance. Thank you, ma'am.
Very much. Very nice.
And thanks for your family service. Where's your mic?
Is it on?
We're going to make sure mics are on here. There we go.
Very good.
All right, and the purpose of the event is to discuss the economy for all South Carolinians and discuss how education and infrastructure and the pro-growth environment all come together to make us the greatest state in the nation, to grow a business and raise a family. Got Joe Swan here from Clemson University, too. Sorry, guys, you're Carolina. I'm
Go
Clemson.
Tigers.
Go Tigers. Did I just alienate half the room? I got a thumbs up from the guy in the back. We wanted to start off, Governor Haley, talking about the fact that this first term of yours, this first 4 years, not even 4 years yet, you've brought jobs to every single county, 46 counties across the entire state, over 40,000 jobs. And today, and I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit, on Highway 290 and more, $1 billion investment with 500 new jobs, the single largest capital injection on the front end in the history of the state of South Carolina, and we thank Governor Haley for that.
Thank you very much.
What was the name of the company?
Toray Industries.
And they're from Japan.
They are the largest producer of carbon fiber in the world, and they have picked Littlemore, South Carolina, to invest $1 billion. They have 400 acres, and they will be hiring 500 people in phase 1. But South Carolina is now in the carbon fiber business, and that is a great thing for South Carolina because there is not a plane or a car or in the Winter Olympics a sled board or anything else that you see where they are now not using carbon fiber. It is all about make it lighter, make it smaller, and carbon fiber is the wave of the future, and South Carolina is right on that wave.
Well, and Governor, I know it's more than 40,000 at this point. All 46 counties, sure, right?
It is not. It is.
Oh,
so let me
okay. I jumped ahead there.
So one is we have announced 43,750 jobs in 45 out of 46
Okay,
counties.
that's clap-worthy there. That's. And you still got a year before the first term ends here.
I do. You know, basically what this came down to was we said when we came into office, we want to be in the customer service business. I grew up in business. That's what it's all about. And you have to take care of your customers. So you saw me take a lot of heat by having all state employees say it's a great day in South Carolina. But the goal of it was the other side of that, which was they had to say, how may I help you? I wanted them to remember who it was that they worked for. I wanted them to be proud of working for South Carolina, but remember that their job was to answer the person on the other side of the line, solve their question, solve their problem, and get them to where they needed to go. We looked at all the agencies, every director I put in place. I said, time is money. And if you are costing a person or a business time, then you are costing them money, and that's unacceptable in South Carolina. We went a step further. DHEC, if you had ever dealt with that permitting agency, if you ever dealt with them, it was bureaucratic, it was political, and it was slow. So the first thing we did was we replaced everybody off the DHEC board. We put all business people on the board, and the chairman of that board is the president of a construction company. He understands time is money. And so papers don't sit on desks anymore. And what we've said is if you're going to approve, approve quickly. If you're going to deny, deny quickly. But don't cost a business another day of money. And that has worked. But the best thing that we did out of all of that was we got into the customer service business. And then we saw that in South Carolina, we were taking better care of our trial lawyers than we were our businesses. We did not cap lawsuits. And so we quickly passed tort reform, brought us up with every other state in the Southeast and where we needed to be. And then we went back and we said, okay, what else do we need to do? And what I said was, if we're going to bring up South Carolina, we have to bring up all of South Carolina. And so we went to the Department of Commerce and we saw that our project managers were paid commission. And we said, we are now going to pay you a higher commission if you close a project in a rural area than if you close it in a city. So all of a sudden, companies would come in and they'd say, I want to go to Charleston. And my project managers would say, we'd love to show you Charleston, but have you seen Orangeburg? Let me show you Clarendon. What about Jasper? And that is how we got 43,000 jobs in 45 out of 46 counties. You look at what we do now. Yes, we build planes. Yes, we build cars. Yes, we're the #1 tire producing state in the country. But did you know we are now the first manufacturer of flat screen TVs in the entire country? Element Electronics, 500 jobs in the small town of Winnsboro, South Carolina. Colgate Palmolive, 350 jobs in the small town of Hodges, South Carolina. And now Toray Industries, the largest investment, $1 billion in Moore, South Carolina. That's what's happening in our state.
I'm not doing a golf clap. If I do it too hard, you're all going to have eardrums that are burst, okay? And that brings us to the next topic on this line, because when you talk about creating that many jobs in 45 out of 46 counties, most jobs, and of course, Governor, you know this, in this room, we represent a lot of small businesses. Hispanic-owned businesses, African-American-owned businesses, non-minority-owned businesses. The majority of people in this state who have a job are employed by someone with fewer than 100 employees. So I know that you came from a background of small business. Your family has a small business, and you were, if I'm correct, you're the CFO, so to speak. And so how do we make sure that government works not only for the big companies that are coming in, because that's obviously working, but what do we do to restructure state government to make it more efficient to help small business?
Well, and let me give you a little bit of my background, and it'll show you how I'm thinking. I didn't suddenly think about getting into the customer service business because it came to me. It was from growing up in it. So I grew up in the retail business. My parents started their business in the living room of our home, and 30 plus years later, it was a multi-million-dollar company. I started doing the books for them when I was 13. It was not until I got to Clemson that I realized that wasn't normal. But what I did learn was the value of a dollar. And I knew that when times were tough, and the one thing about the business was there was never a day that it was easy. When times were tough, I had to stretch that dollar, I had to prioritize, and I had to figure out how to make it go the longest mile. And when times were good, we could never celebrate because we never knew when the rough times were coming back. And if you're in small business, you're never celebrating. You're just thinking about growing. And if you're in small business, which is what I tell all of my agency directors, if we give businesses cash flow, if we give them profit margins, what's the first thing they do? They expand, they hire people. So the goal of South Carolina is, how do I get you more cash flow? How do I reduce your overhead? How do I make sure that you're paying less so that you can hire more people? So that is the thought process that I have. Now you take that into the look at South Carolina's landscape. 95% of our economy is small businesses. So that's really who we are aiming for. That's really when I say time is money and the paper off the desk, it's those. It's not the Boeings and the BMWs. We love those. But it is the 95% of small businesses. So if you look at Bobby Hitt, who's my Secretary of Commerce, he's big business. He's my big manufacturing guy. The reason we make such a good partnership, I'm that small business girl. I remember what it was like to try and make ends meet. And I still remember that the fact that our employers that employ 10 people or less, 20 people or less, that's our bread and butter. So what we did was we established a regulatory review committee. If you go and look at the regulations that we throw at small businesses that are just ridiculous. We set up this committee and we had them go through, and they went into every agency and just took away all these things that didn't matter, license fees and all these extra paperwork things that didn't do it. Everything that my agencies could do, we did it immediately. Everything that the legislature was required, we have Senator Tom Davis and we have Representative Eric Bedingfield who are already putting the legislation in place to do that. We are going to do that committee every summer to make sure we're hitting all of our small businesses. So any of you that have a business where you see something that is not common sense, let us know. Because that's exactly why we're doing it. The second thing is we have an office in Commerce. And what we do is we do different shows. We basically show small businesses how to be a vendor for Boeing and BMW and Toray. We show small businesses what they need to do to get certified to work with the big guys like that. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want, is to make sure we're doing that. We do financial matches to where we can combine our small businesses with our lenders to make sure they're finding financial partners that allow them to grow their business and do more with it. And so we're constantly trying to find new ways to do that. And that's where I think the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is going to be a great partner, is we need to know more of what you need from us and make sure that we're doing everything that satisfies you in the process. The next part of it is basically the commitment of my recruiting jobs. When we bring a company to South Carolina, I work very hard to make sure that the company has the trained workforce and that we do everything we need to so that they find a home in South Carolina. But I ask for two things. I tell them they have to hire my South Carolinians and they have to use my South Carolina small businesses. And we make sure of that. If you look at Boeing, 92% of their business is with South Carolina businesses. I just opened up Continental Tire, and I was staying on them. They just announced $100 million worth of business with South Carolina businesses. Torrey Industries knows it's got to be South Carolina businesses. I had a company in Florence that didn't follow that. I started to get phone calls, and they said they're using out-of-state companies. I called the CEO, and I said, you made a promise. And he said, well, we don't know who to go through. And I sent him a list of suppliers. They are now working with South Carolina businesses. So now we have a list that is run through Commerce that is all South Carolina by companies. So that when a company comes here, we can turn it over to them and they immediately see the companies that they can be using. And that's why they are now referring to us as the beast of the Southeast. That's why we have the fastest growing economy on the East Coast. It's because we're taking care of those that take care of us. We're taking care of our own small businesses.
And this is one of the few states where Governor Rick Perry's yet to run poaching ads, because I don't think it'll work with Governor Haley here. So,
he's asked me to stay out of Texas.
Yeah. If you want to start running some ads there, we'll support it. And the idea is a rising tide lifts all boats. We've heard that before. And in addition to being a political talk radio host, which I appreciate that common sense thing. Y'all didn't get that, did you? I mean, how many of you listen to the program? Come on, get with the program. In addition to being a talk radio host, I am a commercial banker. I've joked with Ron Ernest back there at Grand South Bank with whom I work. The only thing I need to be now is a lawyer. But that'd be 3 strikes. Nothing wrong with being a lawyer. You just can't be a lawyer, a banker, and in politics. That's right. You can't recover from that. But a lot of the folks we bank are people like Bobby Laconey over there from Innovative Manufacturing, works with General Electric a lot. We got Robert Green, who works with Hubble Lighting here in town. And so when these big companies come in, there's a trickle-down effect. People don't like the phrase trickle-down, but it does work, Governor, and we've seen that, haven't we?
That's right, and that's why you're seeing our contractors across the state, they're breathing again. They're doing business again. I've always said if you see orange cones and you see buildings being built, we're doing something right, because that means we're getting contractors back to work. That means we've got actual workers out on the street doing it, and that's when you know you've hit the right economy. I'm not satisfied yet, but you can see it. It is now breathing. You can see the fact that when we first came in 2011, 11.1% unemployment. We're now at 6.6. This is the first time since 2001 that we've been below the national average. So a 5-year unemployment low, people are back to work, businesses are moving again, people are starting to have trust and faith again. They may not in D.C., but they are in South Carolina.
And one thing about those unemployment numbers is keep in mind, guys, we have tens of thousands of people pouring into South Carolina every single year for the opportunity it provides. So not only, Governor, are you having to create jobs, and is the state government trying to create the environment to create jobs for existing citizens. We've got tens of thousands of people pouring in, and so the fact we're down to 6.6% while we still grew 2% last year is a notable accomplishment, and thank you for your leadership on that front.
Well, and let me take it a step further. You know, a lot of what we do with the It's a Great Day in South Carolina is encourage the fact that we should be positive. We should be proud of where we live. South Carolina is doing so much better than so many other states. But the negativity we kept hearing was, I don't want to pay for that person on the couch. Why am I paying for that person not working? What are you doing about those people getting welfare? So we tested it. We went in and we looked, and I worked with my DS director, Lillian Collar, who's fantastic. We pulled her in from Hawaii. And she and I talked about the fact, how do we get people from welfare to work? And so what we've done is, before, DC would say, when someone comes into the office, check the boxes and hand them a check. Now when they come into the welfare office, we check the boxes and we say, what do you do? What are you good at? What's your skill set? Just by asking those few questions, we match them up with businesses, and we have taken over 20,000 people off of welfare and put them to work. We did it without hiring one extra person. We did it without spending one extra dollar. All we did was go one step further. And what I hope it shows and teaches all of us, they don't want to sit on the couch. They want to be productive. They want to make their children proud. They want to be active citizens in the community. We just got to push them that step further. We got to show them how. And when you show them how, they end up reaping benefits by starting their own businesses, getting into jobs, being more productive. So we'll continue to do that.
And one of the things I want to go back to for a moment is this notion of making government more efficient. Because I know it's been a long battle since, well, we're in Greenville, so Carroll Campbell. How many of you remember Governor Carroll Campbell? I won't tell you how old I was when Governor Campbell was in office. But when Governor Campbell was in office, that was a breath of fresh air. And we started to get South Carolina moving again, lots of restructuring at the state government level. He led the Republican Renaissance in this state from being here in Greenville. But Governor Haley, you just signed the Department of Administration bill, which is probably the largest overhaul of state government since the days of Carroll Campbell. So it's sort of like in the last 2 or 3 decades, we haven't had that kind of move to bust up the Budget and Control Board and the inefficiencies of how we spend state money. So can you explain the Department of Administration?
Well, first, basically the way it was before was South Carolina had what I called the big green ugly monster, but it was known as the Budget and Control Board. And it was 5 people from the heads of government, the head of finance, House Finance, the head of Senate Finance, the treasurer, the comptroller general, and myself, 5 of us that would manage all of state government. But you really weren't managing state government. Millions of dollars were going into this building that employed 1,000 people, and you didn't know what they did. And so from Carroll Campbell's time all the way through Mark Sanford's time into ours, governors have tried to say, why can't we be like every other state in the country and have a Department of Administration? And the legislature knocked us down over and over and over again. But just to give you an idea of what is a Department of Administration, imagine as a CEO if you had no control over your human resources. Imagine as a CEO if you had no control over your IT services. Imagine as a CEO if you didn't know what buildings you owned or what automobiles you owned. A month ago, that was me. That's how government functioned in South Carolina. Now, I've been asking for 3 years for a list of our buildings and our cars. They couldn't tell us that. Now I will be able to get it because they now come under me. All IT services, they should be talking to each other, but every separate agency has its own IT services. Now they will all go into one office under the governor's office so that they're all talking together. All human resources will go into the governor's office. That way agencies can do what they were supposed to do, which is work for the citizens of the state, not dealing in paperwork. So we just became more efficient, more effective, and we went back towards what a real state looks like. And I will tell you, biggest restructuring effort since Carroll Campbell, but we can't get too excited. We've got a little bit more to go, but I will tell you it was a huge win for South Carolina, a huge team effort from a lot of people to say it's time for us not to be backwards anymore. We need to move South Carolina forward.
Well, and since the Palmetto Conservative Alliance and the SC Hispanic Chamber are committed to making sure everybody, regardless of your race, your background, your age, circumstances of your birth, you have a good shot at building a business in this state, that works for everybody. Structuring government to serve the people works. And I know that Sherry Schilling over at Chick-fil-A thought about a trademark infringement case with the Great Day and said, too close to it's my pleasure. Right, Sherry? Close. But the Constitution of 1895, Governor Haley, that was put together led by Pitchfork Ben Tillman, I would point out he was a Democrat, okay? He was a Democrat. He was terrified, let's be honest, he was terrified of the prospect of a minority governor of South Carolina. He was a Democrat in 1895 during Reconstruction. He was terrified of, at that time, in his mind, God forbid, an African-American Republican might become governor. I love the fact that you're the first Indian-American woman governor.
Instead they got an Indian-American female, so I think we got to...
But the whole idea was to divest power from the governor's office, give it to the legislature, put it in the Budget and Control Board. So in the event a black Republican governor was elected, he or she would be, well, he at that time would have been powerless. And we are moving into the 21st century with spades with this Department of Administration.
And a few of them were kicking and screaming the whole way. But I will tell you what we need to remember is more of them were with us than not. And that's what shows that South Carolina is moving forward. I mean, Whoever thought that we would have a female governor? Whoever thought we'd have a minority female governor? Whoever thought that the legislature would start to let go in South Carolina? All of those things are happening. So it's a new day in South Carolina, and it's a day where we no longer have stereotypes and we no longer are labeled at being a certain way. We're a state that loves business. We're a state that loves immigrants. We're a state that is hardworking, that does what we need to do. We love our families, we have great faith, and we're going to move forward. That's what we want people to know South Carolina for.
We're a state that's conservative by ideology, not by race. That's We're conservative on values, not on the color of your skin. And I think that's the new face of the New South, isn't it?
That's right.
Isn't that what they said about you in Newsweek? The new face of the New South? I mean, that was like the first week.
It was.
All right. Well, what we're going to do here is, we're about halfway through, so I want to take a few questions from the floor regarding small business development. I'm only going to have time for 3, okay? So we'll take 3 questions from the floor about small business development in the state, and then we're going to come back, talk a little bit about the, as our mutual friend Tim Scott calls it, Unaffordable Care Act, and the Medicaid expansion in the state. Okay, so who wants to ask the first question? Don't everybody raise your hands at once.
Oh, were we that good?
Come on, Frank, you've never been quiet.
I'm trying to be polite.
Well, come on, Frank. You got something to say, don't you?
Well, again, my brother and I, we're trying to think positive. You know, with all this stuff coming down from Washington, trying to figure out how we as South Carolinians can group together, okay, and do things out of the box, so to speak, especially with health care. And I didn't know if that was in the works, if something where, you know, all the businesses in South Carolina can pool their resources and really get the insurance companies not to be in control, but the people to be in control. Because I think a lot of times we forget that, you know, a lot of people think Obama did this. Well, he did it with the help of large insurance companies that don't want to lose their power, if you hear what I'm saying.
Well, I think that what we have to remember is, if we are ever going to talk about health care, you can't talk about health care without talking about options, because that's really what allows it to be good quality, to make sure you can afford it, to make sure that it's right. What you are talking about, in actuality, is a state exchange. So, and you may not have thought of it that way, but that's exactly what that is, pulling a bunch of people together to do a state exchange. That was the initial thought of what Obamacare was going to be. They wanted to see if all the states would do a state exchange. We actually studied that. So, you know, when it first came down, we got some people together and I said, let's look at every part of this. And what happened was, when we talked about doing a state exchange, everything that we needed waivers for, everything that we needed options for, we went back to DC and said, well, we would need a waiver for this. Or every answer they gave us was no, no, no. Well, if you're not going to give us the flexibility to do a state exchange the way we know it could be done, why would we do it? And that's exactly why we didn't do a state exchange. The hard part about health care in this country is it is so federally mandated. And as long as it's federally mandated, it really keeps us from even being able to have an effective health care system that is managed from the top. So the best thing to do is to not do it, which is what we've learned from Obamacare. It truly is the disaster we thought it was. You know, if we ever thought that it was all talk and it was Republicans saying this is terrible and this is Democrats saying give it a chance, the proof is really in what happened. Now, the good thing that came out of Obamacare was we needed to talk about health care. We needed to talk about small businesses being able to afford health care, because I know in our small business we couldn't afford it. When we tried to afford it, we tried to do percentages with the employees. Most of them couldn't afford it. When we finally found a point where we could afford it, the next year it went up so high none of us could afford it. And so you were constantly fighting the fact that you were trying to give the benefits of the big guys just to keep the good employees, and you never could do it. So what I think it comes down to is a little bit harder than pooling companies. What we have to do is say, what actually costs healthcare to grow? And what in South Carolina are we going to do to reduce the cost of healthcare? I'll give you this, my HHS director, Tony Keck, I've never really talked to anybody about this scenario he gave me, but it's a brilliant scenario. He said, when he first came to me and I talked to him about healthcare, he said, if I had a pillow, and that pillow, if you slept on it every night, you would never have another day of sickness. You would live as long as you wanted. you would be healthy, you would be vibrant, you would be energetic, and you would never have another physical problem a day in your life. Would you take it? And I said, yes. He said, what about if I offered it to you for $1? He said, would you buy it? I said, for every member of my family. He said, the number one group that would fight you on it would be the healthcare industry, because it would put them out of business. And so what you have to remember is the healthcare industry is in business. This is a business for them too. Insurance companies are in a business. They're all in it for a profit. Not one of you are here that don't try and make that extra dollar at the end of the day. Well, that's true for healthcare. So what we do have to do is work with the industry to reduce the cost of healthcare. We looked at a hospital in the upstate that had seen 60 patients 1,000 times in 1 year. Think about those numbers. 60 patients had walked through their emergency room 1,000 times in 1 year. And so the hospital noticed that there was a problem. We certainly in state government noticed that there was a problem. So now we've put transparency into our hospitals to where now if someone comes into the emergency room, we triage. We get them with a primary care physician. We get them with telepsychiatry if we need it. We make sure that they get the help they need, so it is not a temporary visit. They now have a primary care giver that they go to, so they never again go into the emergency room. And we monitor that to make sure that happens. So that in itself is going to be something that we think is going to really work in South Carolina to bring down the cost of healthcare. Because if we can bring it down in South Carolina, your insurance will go down. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to try and be the first state in the country that does payment reform, which means if a doctor tells a patient to stop smoking and they don't, if a doctor tells a patient to take their medication and they don't, we can no longer give you benefits if you're not going to listen to what the doctor says. You have to have skin in the game. You have to show that you are willing to help yourself before we are going to help you anymore. So that's the next thing. So it allows doctors to not waste their time, the costs, and the billable issues if they're not taking care of themselves. So a lot of this is going to take us a little bit longer, but it's going to the heart of the problem, which is we have to get people to take care of themselves and do it because they know that there's an incentive in there. Until we incentivize people to be healthy, we're not going to have a health.
Well, and that's a good time to go ahead and just segue into the healthcare discussion because, well, frankly, I'm trying to get my mind around how you could go to an emergency room 1,000 times in a year. Is anybody else doing the math on that? I mean, there are still 365 days in a year. My goodness. Well, the notion, whenever the Obamacare Affordable Care Act rolled out and we started having the actuaries releasing figures, I understand that in South Carolina they were saying we could expect about a 70% average increase in the cost of premiums. I've talked to business owners who are experiencing that.
Our director of insurance said that they would see up to 70% increases in premiums, yes.
It's truly unbelievable because I have people who I bank who are coming to me saying, all right, how are we going to maintain our profit margin if we have to do a 70% increase? And many of them are under the 50 employee threshold. So they're going to be forced to put people onto an exchange. I would ask you, Governor Haley, because you laid out some great ideas in terms of a discussion on health care there. But I agree with you on not expanding Medicaid in South Carolina. I don't think we could afford it. I don't think there's enough money in the state to do it without a confiscatory tax unlike we've ever seen before. But if we do reject the Medicaid expansion in the state, will we have any relief from the sticker shock on premiums? Can we expect any reduction?
You know, I think, well, first of all, the relief is the fact that we didn't take the Medicaid expansion. And for those of you, the Medicaid expansion was the carrot that President Obama put out there for Obamacare. And basically it was, if the states give us $1, then D.C. would give them $9 back, which sounds like a great rate of return, to start covering all of these people that would not normally be covered. So you were pulling in a whole nother population of people and start giving them government health care. What they put in the bottom fine print that you didn't see was they were going to pull it back 3 years from now. How cruel is it to give someone health care and 3 years from now pull the rug out from under them and say, never mind? And what elected official is going to do that? What elected official is going to pull the rug out from under them? So then all of a sudden your state is bankrupt because you are suddenly having to pay for a population you couldn't afford in the first place, all in the name of that extra $9. So what we are seeing now is all of my colleagues, governor colleagues, had to make the decision. Some took the state exchanges, some didn't. Some took the Medicaid expansion, some didn't. South Carolina has been proven right. all the way around, because we would not have been able to function had we taken the Medicaid expansion. And every state that took it is now feeling a burn that we are not feeling. So that is the relief. We're not going to realize we're feeling relief, but we are. The second side of it is Obamacare in itself shows the complete problem with D.C. The governors knew before the rollout that the website was 40% incomplete on the day of the rollout. Which of you would launch a website that was 40% incomplete? Then they said they were going to enroll small businesses online. Well, that's what we all love, anything online, anything that can go quicker. Well, then all of a sudden, 30 days before the launch, they said, we won't be able to do it online, fax it in. Well, if you're faxing it in, that means somebody's on the other side having to type it in, and you're hoping they get it right. And now they're saying, well, we're going to delay it another year. It's going to fall under its own weight. It will fall under its own weight, because something that is not functional to start with can't be fixed. And they have poured so much money into it that you're just not going to see any sort of effort. So I'm actually pretty calm about the fact that from everything we've seen, and all the governors are going to D.C. this weekend, and we'll talk about it more, it is falling under its own weight. The concern I have is the fear of the companies that are saying, how are we going to afford this? And the fact that they're dropping their employees from 40 hours to 30 hours. So all this work we've done in South Carolina to really try and get us strong, it is going to really harm us if companies start to go below that 40-hour threshold and go to 30 hours, because then we're getting back into that economic challenge that we were in to start with. So this is a challenge in progress, but it's a challenge that we've done well to win so far, and I think we will continue to do it. What it means for small businesses, we'll continue to survive the way we've always survived. We'll continue to stress about it at night the way we always have. What I do believe, though, is the majority of the country has seen that the one monster that was going to cause healthcare to go up to 70% in South Carolina is failing. And when the country realizes it's failing, it's just a matter of time before they scrap it.
And Governor Haley, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about, again, sort of what we discussed at the beginning, which is just job creation and business development. Because we've been very intentional with Palmetto Conservative Alliance and, of course, the Hispanic Chamber to make sure we're lifting all boats, so to speak. The economic tide rising in South Carolina lifts everybody. Can you share with us a little bit, because I know we've seen historic gains in minority business ownership in South Carolina. How are we looking on that front, and what can we do to aid even more rapid growth in minority business ownership? You
know, I think, first of all, I can't commend the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce enough. I really, in what you are doing by bringing Hispanic businesses together is really important for South Carolina. I need it all over South Carolina. I really need it to be louder, and I want to help you get that voice out. The fact that you are partnering with them is a way for me to go back and say, okay, we're finally bringing the forces together that need to see it happen. Minority businesses, what I'm doing, I focus on small businesses, because minority businesses are small businesses. And if we focus on that, that's what we need to do. The best thing I can do for you is make sure we've got the education out there. How do I make sure you know what is available? We do have a minority business office in the governor's office that is constantly working with small businesses. We do trade shows, we do fairs, we do as many things to get your name out there. But I've also moved it to commerce, to where all small businesses, we're getting your name out there. There are a lot of different options. So if you go to commerce and you go to the small business, or you go to the governor's office and go to small business, you will see an array of things that we are doing for small businesses. And I would encourage you, get involved in that and see what that is. The other side of it is go through the Hispanic Chamber to tell me what you need, what else you don't see. If you see another show that we could be doing that would encourage Hispanic businesses out there, because that's what I want to be able to help. There is not a, and I can say this, you know, for a long time we were concerned about the fact that South Carolina was slow moving when it came to minority businesses or minority business owners or things like that. It's just not like that anymore. I mean, what you see and what I've seen through my parents and what they had in their businesses is South Carolinians and Americans appreciate legal immigrants. They appreciate people who come here with the same passion and the same fight that is the fabric of America. Amen. That is what we do. That is what we're trying to do. And I know when my parents came here, they came to this country because they wanted a better life for their kids. That was it. It was that simple. And so they left wealthy lifestyles in India to start all over in this country because they knew there was one thing that their kids could get here that they couldn't get there. And that was the freedom to be as successful as you wanted to be without anyone getting in your way.
And the whole idea is that freedom works for everybody.
Right.
And as I tell Evelyn Lugo down there all the time, I'm a Republican with compassion for all people. Have I got to try this in Spanish now? Soy uno, no. Is it soy uno republicano? Yeah. Con compasión por todas las personas?
Yeah. Oh!
Excelente. All right. I know the governor has to go back to Columbia in a few moments, but we want to ask you one last thing, Governor Nikki Haley. And first of all, again, can we get one more round of applause? We thank her for coming. And for my board members who may go apoplectic here, I'm saying this as Josh Kimbrell, not as chairman of Palmetto Conservative Alliance, because I'm sure I've already been audited by the IRS. I endorse Governor Nikki Haley for 4 more years in the governor's mansion. If we can get 4 more years like the last 3, we are going to be in great shape.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I'll have to answer for that to the board later, I'm sure. The governor, I know that we're working on infrastructure in South Carolina, and I drive 85 through 85 every day, and this state's growing so quickly, and we need to expand infrastructure, but we don't want to do it while raising taxes and burdening businesses. So can you elaborate a little bit? I believe it was last legislative session. Was it $1 billion in new funding, $90 billion a year without raising taxes?
Yes.
That's only a feat. That's a feat only an accountant could pull off.
Well, you know, this is basically what we went to the legislature and we said was, we can keep these businesses coming. We can keep recruiting, but if we don't have the infrastructure to maintain it, it will fall. And that means roads, bridges, air, rail, ports, all of that has to be a part of South Carolina if we're going to continue to grow. So if you look at the ports, we are the only state in the country that has put all the money aside that when the feds give us the green light, we will have $300 million ready to dredge the Port of Charleston. You take it a little further, we started the inland port because what do businesses need? Product to market as fast as we can. The inland port allows us to now make sure that we can get product to market faster. And that shows the rest of the world that we're thinking ahead of the times. We're actually one of the few states that are actually putting more into infrastructure. So we've got the inland port going. You look at rail, we've got dual rail down in the low country and we're going to continue to expand that. And then you look at air, Greenville Spartanburg's doing great, we've got Charleston doing great, Hilton Head Savannah, we just had another announcement with JetBlue, Columbia I'm working on, it's not quite there yet, but the goal is we're trying to get CEOs in and out of South Carolina easily and comfortably so that they can continue to put their businesses here. And then you've got roads, and everybody knows our roads are not great. And you look at our roads and you go to North Carolina, you go to Georgia, and you see the big difference. So we had the biggest transportation bill we'd seen in 25 years, $1 billion, and we did it without raising taxes. You will soon see orange cones everywhere. So now the interesting thing is everybody's saying, well, why don't we raise the gas tax? So yes, we have the lowest or one of the lowest gas taxes in the country. That's not a bad thing because we're getting our product faster and we're doing it less. If you go to North Carolina, it's so funny, whenever I go to North Carolina, everybody says, will you talk to our governor about how high our gas taxes are? And I want them to come talk to South Carolinians about the fact that we have good low taxes. What we want to remember is, when the legislature needed $300 million for the ports, they said we needed to raise taxes, and we didn't. When the legislature said we need money for roads, we did $1 billion, and we didn't raise taxes. If we are doing it every year, and I'm telling you we're committed to infrastructure every year, what is the rush to raise taxes? Let me pull the turnip a little bit more. The money is there. You know, you look at what we've done in education. We announced a huge education reform, $170 million to start making sure that money is going into poverty districts for reading and technology without raising taxes. It goes to the fact that when you're in business, you prioritize and you say what's important. We could never, in our clothing store, my mom always said, we can't control who comes in the door. What we can control is the service we give them and how we spend the money we make. That's how I look at the state. We can control the service we give our customers, which are you, and how we spend that money. If we can do all of these things without raising taxes, what's the urgency? And you'll see the entire legislature wants to raise it. It will be a huge battle for me to fight this all year long. What I will say is my commitment to you is we're going to keep doing roads and bridges and ports and rail and all of those things, but we're going to do it, and we're going to do it without raising taxes.
Amen to that. And Governor, before you go back to the mansion tonight, I guess you're going home tonight.
I am.
Okay, before you get to go home, I want to say, just take a moment of a point of personal privilege on this and say we've got a lot of folks here, business owners and leaders, of course, but we've also got a lot of people who are fighting social issues too. And I just want to say thank you. Because Lisa Van Riper's here from Citizens for Life. She's the president of Citizens for Life. Alexa Newman over there from Carolina Pregnancy Center. Mike Hamlet from First North there. And so many folks we fought in that battle with. Palmetto Conservative Alliance, we're committed to protecting human life and religious liberty and everything in the state as well. And guys, I'll tell you that I don't personally believe you can do a great job protecting private property if you cannot protect personhood. And so the governor back in 2012, is it 2012, Lisa? Came up to CPC in Spartanburg and signed two of the most groundbreaking pieces of legislation, in my view, in modern state history when it comes to protecting preborn babies. We had an opt-out of funding of abortions under the Unaffordable Care Act, and you signed that, and we appreciate that. We also had, there's a practice in many states where if a child survives a botched abortion, you can still take that child's life on the delivery room table. Not in South Carolina anymore. And Governor Haley signed both of those bills, and I would say thank you on behalf of all South Carolinians of conscience.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm sure we've got some Haley bumper stickers. So is it NikkiHaley.com, right?
Yes.
NikkiHaley.com. And I'm done here. So Governor, if you want to say some final remarks, we'll wrap up, and I will invite you to go wipe out the rest of that buffet. But I'm going to try and beat you to the fried green tomatoes. Thank you all for coming.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the Alliance. You've always been great friends. You do good things. I am very grateful to Josh. I met him before the primary going into the...
We met at a creamery. It was a ice cream shop in Malden, right. And you were a state rep then.
That's exactly right.
Man, how times have changed. I'm older, you're governor.
So it was, it's been a partnership, but to see you combine really with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I can't thank you enough. This is such a valuable organization. This really is, and to put these two organizations together, the only thing better than one great organization is to come together with another one. And that's what we're trying to do across the state, is just bring organizations together, because we can do so much more as a team than we can by ourselves. And the fact that you've done this, I would encourage you to do it again. Let me help you do it again in any way that we can across the state. But what I want you to do is feel really proud of South Carolina, because this is not talk. These are results. And these are results. We all did it. This couldn't have happened if it was just me on a stump saying something. This took people wanting to see a state get better. And this took our people saying, we're going to change and take some gambles to see it get better. But we won. And now we have every state in the country asking, what is it that y'all are doing? I'm not telling, by the way. But it's a good sign, because all of a sudden, our state is the state everybody's looking at. And that's a great thing. But what does that mean? We can never get comfortable, because the time you start to think you've got it is the time you lose it. And so we've got to constantly say, what else, what else, what else? And when you start to get too comfortable, or when you start to think of things to complain about, do something about it. Tell somebody. Make sure that we get some things done. But the one thing I can tell you is we have a strong business environment that's only getting stronger. We've got businesses coming in here because we are a state that understands you take care of the businesses you already have first, and then you go and you recruit others. We are making sure that we don't have unions in South Carolina, because we don't need unions in South Carolina. And
wait a minute. Tell them why you wear the heels. I love that. It's my favorite line.
I don't wear heels for a fashion statement. It's because I really do kick the unions every single day. I really do. The story, and I'll do this real quick because I know you want to get to your fried green tomatoes, but I will tell you that, the union story is an interesting one. We weren't here in office that long when the National Labor Relations Board sued Boeing, sued an American company for creating jobs. DC sued an American company for creating jobs, 1,000 jobs. Think how un-American that is. And if they could sue a company for creating jobs in a right-to-work state, think about those non-right-to-work states. No company would ever go put a foot there if they knew they couldn't leave. Well, we got mad, and we got loud, as South Carolinians do, and every state in the country joined us. And that fight that we fought so hard for those 1,000 employees, while we got loud and we kicked and we continue to kick daily, those 1,000 employees are now 9,000 employees at Boeing in Charleston. Wow. That's what that fight was about. And it is not because I don't dislike unions. I do dislike unions, but
I don't like them much.
But I disliked unions because there was a time and place where we needed them. What I will tell you now is we don't have unions in South Carolina because our companies understand you have to take care of those that take care of you. And our people understand that they would rather deal directly with their employer than have a middleman. That's really why we don't have them. But I do make sure we don't have any companies coming in with unions. We don't do that because we'd rather not have them than have them spoil the water. But we also do, literally every day, there's a company calling me saying, there's a whisper of a union here. There's a whisper of a union there. And all I do is I go to those companies and tell those associates how proud we are of them, and how made in South Carolina means something. And it's because of the loyalty of the product that they do. And you could send a union into Michelin and BMW and any of our companies that we have, and the employees would tell the unions to get out. That's South Carolina. That's something to be very proud of. Thank you all very much.